Alright, what's up guys? I did a stream several months ago with a couple of friends where I convinced them to try out the oldest format in the entire game. This is the 2002 format where the only cards we had at our disposal was the Yugi and Kaiba Starter decks, the original, and the booster set Legend of Blue Eyes. That was all the cards we had accessible to us. So this one is often referred to as Yugi Kaiba format. Sometimes I'll just call it Vintage 2002 format or LOB format. And it's very much a solid format where it's essentially one good stuff deck that reigns supreme. There's little nuances here and there, but I think this is a great format to learn the absolute basics of the game as far as being able to read what your opponent has and kind of bait them into certain interactions, certain responses, and kind of gauge what they may have based on the cards that they play. Because it's essentially a one-deck format where every match is a mirror match, you know what the possible cards are that your opponent has, which can kind of help train you for the modern game where the card pool is immensely more massive, but it's also, if there's a defined meta, you're going to see the same couple of cards in the same couple of decks and understand that concept of counterplay a lot better. So let's go ahead and get into it. I highly encourage anybody that wants to play this deck, definitely pick it up, leave a comment. I'd love to play it on EDO Pro, and maybe I'll even do a tournament of it one day. I would also highly recommend checking out the channel Nostalgio, which is a newly formed channel that's growing a lot in popularity recently. They post a lot of old school deck profiles, a lot of GOAT format, a lot of 2011 format, a lot of Edison format, stuff like that. And they have a section on their Discord for the Yugi Kaiba format. And I'm one of the people on there that seems to be the most adamant about that. So I'll put a link in the description. I highly recommend checking out Nostalgio. And make sure to give them a subscribe as well as myself if you haven't already. But let's go ahead and get into the list. So the most powerful vanilla beater we have in this format is La Jin. We don't have 7 colored fish yet because that wouldn't come until Metal Raiders, and we don't have a Mechanical Chaser yet, which wouldn't come until Tournament Pack 1. I should say I am opting to not only build this deck in cardboard, but also in high rarity. So I went with ultra rare La Jins from Legendary Collection Kaiba. There is a super rare version of this you can get, I think, from Dark Legends, which was sort of a Dark Beginning style reprint set in the late GX, early 5Ds era, that most of the cards in that set are worth a ton of money. I think the super rare La Jins from that set are worth like $70 or something crazy like that. But you can get these for like 50 cents a copy. It's the best vanilla beater that we have access to. We play 2 other play sets of vanilla beaters. We have the Battle Ox and the Neo the Magic Swordsman, which come in at 1700 attack. I actually feel like these are actually the worst cards in the deck. Not because we could be playing better cards, but because they don't really do anything for you other than make sure that when you have the advantage, you are dealing the maximum amount of damage to your opponent when they have an empty board. Because they lose to La Jin, they lose to Maneater Bug, they lose to the 2000 defense walls that are prevalent in this format, and they lose to Wall of Illusion. So the only thing you can do with this is make sure that you are able to beat into your opponent's bluffs, use them as a wall for their own attack stat, and then power them up with stuff like reinforcements to get over stuff like La Jin. But you wouldn't play any other monsters because you want to make sure when you are in a winning position that you're dealing as much damage as possible. Unfortunately, I love Battle Ox. It's such a cool card. One of my favorite really old school monsters like this. I'm really glad to be able to play it. But neither of these two come in a foil printing. The most recent printing of Battle Ox, I think, was in the demo decks that were a special Konami print run given to certain shops and organizations to kind of teach kids how to play the game. And so that's what these Battle Oxes are from. They're from the demo deck, so they're a little bit of a nicer, newer printing. I think all the Neos are from Starter Deck Yugi and Starter Deck Yugi Evolution. We do play 1 2000 defense while we play Giant Soldier of Stone. We only play this at 2. You could play 3. There are plenty of 2000 defense walls in this format, including Mystical Elves and Spirit of the Harp and Aquabador, but this one has by far the best stat line. It's got 2000 defense and 1300 attack on a level 3, which is actually insane. So With reinforcements, you can actually boost this to have more attack than the previous vanillas that I just showed off. So it's worth it to play this over the other 2000 defense walls. But it doesn't do a whole lot for you, so that's why I'm only playing 2. You could play it at 3 if you choose to. This is kind of a controversial choice for me, is I'm actually playing 2 Summon Skull instead of 1. Most people in this format only play the 1. I play the 2 because I would like to think I'm pretty careful about when I invest the cards into bringing this thing out. And you can also, if you or your opponent are playing card destruction, you can set up a Monster Reborn line where you bring this back and it dodges Trap Hole. I do have an original ultra rare Metal Raiders Summon Skull, but I don't like playing the oldest version of the card, even if that's the version at the highest rarity. There's also the Collector's Tin Secret Rares. Again, those are just too expensive. But I did manage to, again, these are from the demo decks as well. And they do have the card text that says they're treated as an Archfiend, although that's not relevant in this format at all. So I decided not to go with foil Summon Skulls, but I do play 2 of those. And next is the effect monsters. So, of course, we play 3 Man-Eater Bug. It is incredibly strategic removal. So the only foil printing of Man-Eater Bug is the original LOB. So again, I just opted to go with common Man-Eater Bugs. And there's a lot of interesting interactions with this. So when you set a monster, your opponent should immediately be afraid that it's this, because this can out any other card in this entire format. There's no Nobleman of Crossout. There's no easy monster removal aside from the big board wipes like Raigeki and Dark Hole. But there are cards that are specific counters to this, such as Swords of Revealing Light and Stop Defense in specific are great counters to this. And so it's this interesting counterplay of, you just set a monster and already your opponent's kind of intimidated of, are they going to have to trade a card 1-for-1 with you when they try to battle into this? Or are they going to have some kind of removal? So it's a very strategic card and one of the most powerful cards in this format. Another card that's one of the most powerful cards in this format that should absolutely be played at 3, but for some reason I only have 2. This absolutely should be a 3 of. I need to go just find my 3rd one. Wall of Illusion. So it has more defense than any of the vanilla beaters have attack. Even though it doesn't have a full 2000 defense, that's irrelevant, because as long as it has more defense than La Jin has attack, you're going to keep this on the field, deal some damage to your opponent, and bounce a monster back to their hand. This is one of the most powerful cards in this format, and is such a absolutely huge punish for just blindly attacking into set monsters. So your opponent is going to have to commit additional cards to out this. And it's especially satisfying when they battle into it with Summon Skull, and the Summon Skull goes back to their hand and they wasted the Tribute, which is a huge swing in tempo for you to be able to take control of the game back. And the last monster we have is Trap Master. This is the other flip effect monster. I don't really like this guy very much at all. I think I would cut one of these out in favor of the 3rd Wall of Illusion. But it is a way to out Trap Hole and some of the other set cards. You can kind of determine if your opponent's set card is a bluff or if it's a Trap Hole. And outing Trap Hole and reinforcements is pretty important in this format because there is little to no back row removal, but wasting a summon on this guy is pretty suboptimal. So he very much underperformed in the stream that we did, so I would definitely consider cutting 1 copy of that. There's also no foil printings of Wall of Illusion or Trap Master, it does bear mentioning. Onto the spells, we play 3 Fissure. It's the only spot removal in this format, and it's very good spot removal. I'm trying to invest in Legendary Collection Yugi's World Super Rare. So far I only have 1 copy of the Super Rare, but eventually we will have a foil play set of Fissures. So incredibly powerful spot removal. Your opponent has a Summon Skull, a La Jin, or one of the other vanilla beaters. You can out it with this and then commit to your own monster and get in for some good damage. It's, again, a pretty big swing in tempo. You just trade 1-for-1 this card with one of your opponent's monsters. And then we have 2 Swords Revealing Light. So there actually was a limited list in this format. There wasn't a ban list, but there was a limited list. And Swords Revealing Light is limited to 2, semi-limited to 2 in this format. So we have the Yugi's Legendary Dex Ultra Rares. It's a modern printing that's not particularly valuable, but it does foil up the rarity a little bit, so I decided to go with that one. Swords Revealing Light is a very powerful card in this format because if it just said neither player could attack, then this card might as well say both players draw 3 cards because it's, advances the turns forward, and there's There's only exactly one out to this card in the form of D-Spell, so unless your opponent has that, they're not outing this card for 3 turns, but it's actually even better than that. I misspoke during the stream saying that it basically says both players draw 3 cards. It's actually way better than that because it can actually be used aggressively where you shut off your opponent's ability to attack, but you can still continue to attack and establish your board. So yeah, it's pretty good. I definitely recommend playing both copies of it instead of just the one. And then we also have the one copy of Stop Defense, which you could play more of this if you choose to, but this is almost like a third copy of Swords because one of the things that these two have in common is that they both can flip up flip effect monsters and trigger their effects. So if your opponent is playing a Hane Hane in addition to Man-Eater Bug, you can flip and activate those effects and cause them to trigger on your opponent's monsters. So if you have no monsters on the field and your opponent has a set card, you might as well go ahead and activate one of these things because if it's a Man-Eater Bug, it will have to trigger and destroy itself or another monster that your opponent controls. So the Stop Defense is just like a third worst copy of Swords in that regard to bait out those flip effects, and it's a nice piece of counter for Man-Eater Bug and Hane Hane if your opponent plays it. But we actually, interestingly enough, do not have Block Attack because Block Attack would not come out until Metal Raiders, but this is an infinitely better card out of LOB. So, and then we have the one D-Spell. It's the one out to Swords, and that's the only thing it's going to be outing because your opponent is not going to set any spells in this format, and there are no other continuous spells worth playing. The equipment is not very good. The field spells are not very good at all. So D-Spell is literally an out to exactly Swords, so that's why it's only played at 1. And then we have our Big 5. Everybody knows what the Big 5 is in this format, so it's Pot of Greed. This is a Secret Rare Pot of Greed out of Legendary Collection, Yugi's World. The one in Legendary Collection, Joey's World, is also Secret Rare. But I would rather play this over like the Dark Beginning Super Rare that's stupidly expensive, or the Duelist Pack Kaiba Ultimate Rare, which is also stupidly expensive. This is a more affordable, and I love Secret Rare, so this is like, these cost like $25, which is a lot, but not nearly as much as the Ultimate Rare, so that's the version I'm playing. Monster Reborn out of Battles of Legend Relentless Revenge. So this is another Secret Rare Monster Reborn that's a newer printing and not particularly valuable, but it looks fantastic. Monster Reborn is amazing in this format, as it always is, but the fact that it also dodges Trap Hole and lets you get bigger monsters like Blue Eyes and Summon Skull on the field without requiring any tributes is huge. And also, if you're able to, let's say you Trap Hole your opponent's Summon Skull, when they tribute summon it, you can then Monster Reborn their Summon Skull back. So it's just so incredibly powerful in this format. Raigeki and Dark Hole are, the big board wipes. Raigeki is obviously a lot more powerful, but you can just activate Dark Hole before you commit to a summon, and it's basically the same card. This is the Raigeki out of the Charmer structure deck. It's a super rare that's a modern printing instead of playing an original LOB super rare, which you could also play the Legendary Collection Kaiba Ultra Rare, or you could play the Collector's Tin, I think it's the 2019 or 2020 Collector's Tin, Prismatic Secret Rare as well. And then the Dark Hole is out of the 2014 Super Starter 5D Starter. Or actually, no, I think this one is out of the Legendary Hero decks, the Nordic deck, Ultra Rare. But those are both 2 Ultra Rare printings of Dark Hole you can pick from. Right now, my Change of Heart is actually an original MRD Ultra Rare. I'll be changing this out for a Legendary Collection Yugi's World Secret Rare when I can get my hands on it, because I'd rather have the original MRD printing in my collection binder and never actually play it. But Change of Heart is actually worse in this format than it ever will be. This card only gets better with time, and it's an unbelievably huge swing in tempo. Taking control of one of your opponent's monsters is one of the most powerful pieces of removal in the game, because not only do you get it off of your opponent's board, but you have the ability to attack with it, you contribute it, there's so many things you can do. So Change of Heart is, usually that can be a game-winning card on its own, depending on the current state of the board. That is all the spells. Onto the traps, of course, is 3 Trap Hole. I'm trying to get a Ultra Rare playset, again, out of Legendary Collection. I think this is Legendary Collection Joey's World, actually. Nope, it's Yugi's World. So, I just like the Fissures, I will have an Ultra Rare playset of Trap Hole. It is the best trap in this format. It's the only kind of preventative removal that you have. All of your opponent's monsters are going to be susceptible to it because they're all going to be normal summoning things that have over 1,000 attack. The only thing with less than 1,000 attack they're going to be playing is our cards are going to be setting. So this won't be able to hit that anyway, but the big punish is when they commit to Summon Skull. but they're usually going to anticipate the resolution of a trap hole on their normal summon anyway. So there's some interesting counterplay, just like Man-Eater Bug with this card, where you expect your opponent to have it, and so you're just kind of debating, okay, how do I commit enough cards to bait out the trap hole and then actually go for a better play? But the only thing you can't do with this is you cannot trap hole a special summon monster, so Monster Reborn gets around it, as I said before. Next is 3, Wabaku. Wabaku is the only battle protection in this format. I don't think there's a foil Wabaku. I couldn't find one when I was looking, and by turning all battle damage to 0, it saves your life points, but it also prevents monsters from being destroyed, which was something that not all of us knew back in the day of Playground Yu-Gi-Oh! Or whatever. So this card is actually much more powerful than we thought it was when we were kids, at least some of us. Yeah, there's no foil printing of this, but it's the only battle protection we have, and it's pretty powerful just to be able to protect your monsters. If you normal summon something and your opponent doesn't respond with Trap Hole, but they still have a set card, chances are it's going to be exactly this. And then the last trap, which is one of my absolute favorite cards in this format, is Reinforcements. This card encourages such a dynamic amount of counterplay, where, like I said, you can normal summon one of your 1700 beaters and set this, and your opponent commits to a La Jin, and then if you don't respond with Trap Hole, they're like, okay, cool, I can beat over your thing then, and then they beat over it, and this punishes that by they lose the combat, which means they have an empty board on your turn, and you can push for game. And I actually won in damage step on stream by being able to resolve this. So it's just the ability to give a monster that 500 point boost, but your opponent can't necessarily see that coming. This is infinitely better than any equip magic in this format. So, yeah, that's it for the LOB deck, the vintage 2002 Yugi Kaiba deck. So let me know if you guys have any questions on this. I think the deck is super cool. I'm looking forward to maxing out my rarities and getting it in full foil. I would love to play this deck in cardboard with other players, but if anybody wants to play it online, just let me know. There's a couple of other card choices you could pick. Just Desserts is an okay card for some pretty decent burn damage, but it's usually not worth it to waste one card worth of card advantage to not really deal with any threats on the board. So the burn damage is not particularly useful. There's also a super high roll dragon variant where you can just main deck the Lord of D, Fluid Summoning Dragon, and Blue Eyes to try to get a more powerful monster than Summon Skull, which is a special summon that's also protected from destruction because of Lord of D. So that's huge, but it's very inconsistent. So it is just the other version of the LOB deck you could play. You could play this, or you could play that, where you just substitute a couple of cards for the Lord of D, Fluid Summoning Dragon, and Blue Eyes, where you have it's just a much more aggro, it has a much higher damage ceiling, but it's a lot less consistent. So you're playing essentially one of those two variants, but this is the infinitely better variant for sure. So let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys next time.
If you guys enjoy nerd-related content about cosplay or anime conventions, or any of the niche fandoms that we're into, like Type Moon, Fire Emblem, or Yu-Gi-Oh!, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more content and like our Facebook page. Also, if you want more updates, follow me on Instagram, and if you enjoy art streams, such as what Michelle does, follow her on Instagram as well. Also, if you like mecha, make sure to subscribe to Starcrossed Soul Zoids for more mecha-related content. Thank you guys so much.